Good afternoon, everyone. As we're getting situated here, we're going to do really quick introductions so we can get through the panel discussion because we all met at lunch, met leading up to this, and we had a lot of really great conversations. So we want to get through as much of it as we possibly can. So to start, my name is Brian Skripak. I'm the Director of Virtual Design and Construction with the Design Build Institute of America.
Good afternoon. Alex Belkoffer, Senior VDC Director with McCarthy Building Companies based in St. Louis, Missouri.
I'm Brad Sara. I'm a Principal and Digital Services Lead at Warren Amani, and we're based in New Zealand and Australia.
I'm Mark Fergus. I'm the Executive Vice President for Cumming Group. We act as owners' reps and also spent 10 years on the ownership side in the Middle East in the past. And happy to be here.
Robin Holkrew. I work with Rock Hill Mechanical at the VDC BIM Manager, and we do ductwork and piping.
We have one piping fan, so fantastic. So how many people here are currently working on a design build project? Show of hands. That's pretty good hand raise, good. So for those of you who are not familiar with design build is a collaborative delivery model where a design builder has a contract with the owner to provide both design and construction services. So this is a real departure from our traditional design bid build or CM at risk, where the owner has those two separate contracts, and in between the design and construction team shall not meet and collaborate. We know there's a lot of tension there. We know there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of presumptions of how we're to act, but design build is a methodology that is rapidly growing. By the end of 2026, we're looking for it to be more than 50% of projects delivered in the United States. In the time frame between 2022 and 2026, the goal is that it'll be $1.9 trillion of construction put in place that'll be design build by that time. So we've seen a lot of growth, and it was really exciting this morning as we were in the keynote, the intro, to see a lot of value statements about collaboration, integration, transparency, reliability. All of those words show up in the only 4 questions that we have for this panel discussion, but it was really interesting to see the overlap and the synergy of Revizto as an integrated collaboration platform and design build as a collaborative project delivery model. So the first question that we wanted to get into is really breaking down those traditional expectations, and I'm gonna pose this to Robin first, because we all initially think of, I think, in design build as how do we bridge that architect or engineer to the contractor goal, but your work is pretty unique at Rock Hill and how you're bridging a different gap.
When we do design build, we do our original layouts with fabricational pieces. We have an entire RFA database, so we start when we finish. It's all fabricatable. Sometimes we will have to do like a shell model that we can pull in to do our design or document drawings, but it stays in the same model. We don't export out to anything. It doesn't change to anything. We just continuously, as the project progresses, add to that same model. So there's not that room for lost data. And we try to set our models up with the least amount of keyed notes as possible. It's drawn in there, your drops to your grills and all that content that we sometimes just say, yeah, that's gonna be there. We try to make sure it's there from the beginning so we can do pre-coordination at the very beginning of a project and know that that ductwork's gonna fit with the conduit racks that are required to be in that area.
Expanding on that, what are some of the opportunities to reduce waste and drive efficiency? Where are you seeing your biggest values? Because I know we heard some other presentations today where maybe some of the challenges are you have these 2 parallel models, a design model and a fabrication model going, and we're oftentimes worrying about coordination there, but you're in a unique spot where it's very streamlined. And
with that design assist or design build, we don't have to take that contract model, break it down into fabrication. We don't have that 2-month, usually we get 2 weeks breakdown period where we have to hurry up and swap what the engineer put in there into something that we can actually fabricate, make sure that the flanges are in there and there's room for this stuff in the duct in the hallway. We don't have to come up this late in the game with our prefabricated racks. In a lot of hospitals, we'll do a massive multi-trade rack. Those pieces go into the model during early design so that there's room for them. And if we need to make architectural modifications to get that rack into the building, it's there early.
What are some of the other perks that you're seeing breaking down those traditional silos that we often have?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think, one of the points you mentioned there, again, from the owner's perspective, is the actual siloed approach to construction, and that creates a lot of waste in itself. And it's the way that generally our contracts are set up. And from an owner's perspective, we're paying for everybody in the room, and so we want everybody to work in a collaborative manner. And so that's where I think things like Revizto and the approaches to design build that are taken from that top level that allow you to define exactly what your outcomes are, and then have everybody aligned in terms of bringing it to the same conclusion and working collaboratively. That's really where Revizto comes into its own, I think.
Yeah, we've got some projects at the moment where we've got both a trade mechanical model and a design mechanical model, but rather than duplicating the models, we've looked at the highest risk elements within that mechanical. So the stuff that needs to be cradled, prefabricated, assign that to the trade, so we can get that the spatial awareness early. And we've let the design proceed with, I guess, the less risky items.
With the two models in a situation like that, we found out that if there's an owner-driven change and the engineer makes that change in their model, and then I try to bring that in through the RFI, it no longer exists in my model. So what was originally an RFI, or a new RFI or change order, we took care of months ago because it didn't work to start with.
Just real quick on the on the waste note, right? And what Robin said about bringing the right information to the table early, that I think is what it's all about. Because ultimately, the right information being there early saves all that rework and saves people from having the fits that normally happen as the design phase evolves, and then we have to essentially rework that design, which makes a time and a cost impact. And if we're really doing design build right, we're bringing the right information to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just like you have that source of truth, that design build team is driving that solution in the same way you're going to Revizto and finding that core source of information to have the answers and the conversations that we've all moved forward with. So that last one, we hit the collaboration topic. This one, we start delving into reliability, which is, four words that we talked about from this morning. So I think it's really interesting to really hear from Brad and see how we're talking about design build in the US, but also different delivery models and what you're seeing in New Zealand and Australia. And even, I know there was a word that was thrown out. I was excited because you told me about it last night, but in the previous session, you talked about the novation process. And we were all kind of like, oh, what's that?
Yeah, thanks. I'm lucky enough to be operating in two countries, in Australia and New Zealand. And so in Australia, we're predominantly design build. In New Zealand, I think because we're down the bottom of the world, away from a lot of people, we have a tendency to experiment, and that goes towards the way that we deliver projects as well. So over the last 12 years, we've had a huge amount of work, infrastructure work come up in New Zealand. So vertical infrastructure, we had some significant earthquakes. We've had more building work than we've ever had to address before. That, in order to deliver that with the limited skill sets that we have, we need to look at different delivery methodologies. Design and build is one of those, but approaching it from a truly collaborative manner. So being able to sit down with what you refer to as a general contractor early, lock ourselves away in a room with a whiteboard and understand where our risk sits, where the GC's risk sit, where trades risk sit, and work out strategies where we can drive collaboration to reduce that. And from Warren Amani's perspective, we lean into that as strongly as we can because we see it as a risk reduction. And when I talk about risk reduction, I don't just mean being sued. I don't just mean a reduced margin. I mean establishing enduring relationships with GCs, with other consultants, with clients, because then we don't need to bid for the next piece of work. And bidding for a piece of work costs us a lot of money. People come to us to work with us. Also, a reduced risk in making sure that our design, we're a design-led practice, we make our living by winning awards, and we need to ensure that those designs are buildable and that those designs make it to operations in the way that we foresee them in concept design. The only way we can do that is to collaborate with contractors. To do that, we need technology. Technology drives collaboration, drives communication. And at the end of the day, we're just a bunch of people trying to do a good job, and we need all of the tools that we've got in our arsenal, like Revizto, to deliver that.
Well, I think it's interesting too, one of the things that you mentioned was that you as the architect are actually typically the ones driving the adoption of Revizto from the outset of the project, not maybe if it was design bid build or something else where you might typically see a McCarthy come in and say, hey, this is what we're going to use, and then you kind of have that reshuffle. But it's great to see that evolution from the outset, which is really what we see in design build in the States, like Alex said, having the right people and the right technology like Revizto on the job from the outset.
Yeah, and that's partially because the way we deliver design build in New Zealand and Australia is the early phases of design are done as a design team. Architect is often procured first, so we set up all the platforms in the way that we need them to reduce our risk, to allow us to coordinate the consultants, which often are not engaged under us, they're engaged under a client, which means we need every lever we can have to get them to do the work we need them to do. Revizto allows a database of those design decisions, of us tracking work that has been closed out, that hasn't been closed out, so we can build up that storybook of what design has been like. So when people like Alex come on board, we can sit with them and bring them on the journey that we've been on for, on a large project, 5 years. I didn't address novation, just for the people that don't know what it is. So it is in an early phase of design, the design team will be contracted to the client. At a point in time, usually halfway through design, a contract will come on board, and our contract will be novated to the contractor. So the ownership of that contract switches from client to contractor.
What are some of the other, and maybe for anybody in the group to build upon that, I think we talk a lot about people and culture and having that collaborative endeavor to win the next project. Anybody else seeing that value and how you partner with people?
It's so important to have a group that everybody is willing to collaborate for, especially for the mechanical contractor, because we prefabricate so much. And the ductwork, it goes out in pieces that are all fabricated in the shop. There's no 90 elbow sitting in the box that somebody can grab like piping. They're all custom fabricated pieces. So it's critical that when we coordinate, it stays that way through the model, and we can have those sign-offs and everybody's input and buy-in to make it work.
That to me is the fundamental alignment and the mindset reliance on the model. That's the way that we're going to do business, right? It's all about the full team believing it. I would say walking the talk, right? I mean, that's a big piece of that being successful, because you have that conversation in a pursuit, or you have that conversation once you're put together, pre-novation or post-novation. And you don't want to have to come back to that repeatedly. Yeah. You should be able to charge forward in earnest and have the belief that we can be lean and be efficient and really push and drive the project to its outcomes as efficiently as possible. If we have to keep coming back to that conversation, the model right of reliance and how we're going to use these tools together, it really slows down the process, which is supposed to be optimized for that.
Yeah. Yeah, we had somebody, there was a presentation where they said, our goal is to write the contract, have all the negotiations, go put it on a shelf and not have to worry about going back to it, because we all defined a well laid out plan that we agreed upon to deliver and how we're going to use technology to do it. So the only time we need to go back to it if there's an issue, and we don't want to have those issues. We want to take it and move it forward. So I think reliability becomes it's an important word there, because we think of reliability and we still have this multi-output process of construction documents and models, and where does the model lie in that? And I think one of the things that's interesting, there was a presentation right after lunch the three of us were in. They showed a lot of overlay of documentation and model to express and understand that. How are you guys seeing that application of Revizto? I think it's interesting from a QA/QC process, because we don't want to see the model be not updated in lieu of the drawings, which are our contract documents, but that often happens. So that's a little bit of a gap, and I think there's an interesting way to synchronize that process.
From my perspective, I think that's the really good thing about Revizto, is that it collates all those various models from the trade right up to the fully federated versions. And that was when I first came to the US. I was working with a large semiconductor firm, and they were doing their first design and build project. And one of the biggest issues they had was to get a single model, a single element of truth. To the earlier point about the collaborative side of things, when I'm advising other owners, I'm always looking for teams that can work together and solve problems together. That, in some ways, is more important than price in the initial selection of the teams, because you'll save much more money from having a well-oiled team working together that has that success. And that's across the whole AEC community. And so I just wanted to add that point in there.
Yeah, being able to take advantage of a qualifications-based process and not have to only be based on low bid for that selection is definitely a differentiator.
The overlay is why we started with Revizto, because with our spooling processes, in order to get the field to buy in, we had to have the overlay. It saved us so much time and streamlined our efforts, and it allows the entire team to see why we did what we did with our systems. Before Revizto, we used to get the phone calls, why do you have a set here? Now they just overlay the drawing and they go, oh, Robin wasn't crazy.
If I may, real quick,
Yeah.
I feel like the thing that is often overlooked is the beautiful nature of the issue tracking process in general for design build, because everybody has a list, and everybody has something that they want to be heard on as the design process evolves. And the beauty of Revizto being that single source of not just collaboration, but the single place to have your voice be heard, I think is something that we all should celebrate more of as we look to advent more design build opportunities.
Next word on the screen is transparency that we heard this morning. And I think that's, again, that echoes these two things, these two initiatives, project delivery and collaborative technology are there, they're viable. The next evolution of that reliability conversation, though, brings in a four-letter word, though, risk. And how do we, plan from that? Certainly, if we have the opportunity to have Robin and her company on our team to have that single responsibility to deliver the design and construction or fabrication models, we don't always have that. We have to budget and manage how do we transition from the design team, the architectural team maybe, and the curtain wall or unitized fabrication system, or the structural engineer and the structural detailer and so on. So, Alex, where are you seeing design build kind of from a planning and execution and a risk management standpoint plugging that gap?
Well, it allows you to tackle it head on. That's the beauty of it, right? Is just acknowledge where the risk is. And once we're aligned, then you can go and tackle those risks in the environments like Revizto very, very effectively, because everybody understands that while the risk is there, let's manage it. Let's put our arms around it. Let's accept what we have in front of us, but let's go do our best work together, not tackling it in different silos and then coming back to the table and, presenting a bunch of problems, right? Let's use a unified collaboration space to just address it, tackle it head on, because once it's tackled, then the team can realize all the benefits and the true benefit and results of the design build approach.
Yep.
I don't get to put diagrammatical by nature on my drawings.
I think one of the fundamental failings of humans is that we don't believe that things are real until we see them. When we have a model that comes together into this single source of truth, and we can sit around a table or a screen or a bin box on site, and everyone can see what we're talking about. We know it's real, and we can find the real solutions together.
You see and you believe.
I was just going to say, I was working on a project in Los Angeles, and I had a very complex articulation on the facade. And the architect hadn't made the transition out of 2D yet. And he couldn't understand why it was so expensive. And so we ended up using an alternate estimating platform called CostX from RIB. And with that, we could show our takeoff in a three-dimensional environment. And it was at that point in time they went, okay, we understand it now.
Yep.
And so definitely, to your point, visualization is very much key. And also, again, from the owner's perspective, making sure that we de-risk the project as soon as possible, to make the right decisions about long lead purchasing, about the right design decisions at the right time during the delivery of the project, not just say if a contractor comes on, I've got 6 months to buy this out. That's maybe not the right answer. we need to work through those processes. And again, having that single model really helps us make those decisions and de-risk earlier on. As an owner, I always do not like late information that costs me more money.
We were talking at lunch, about level of development and, bridging design intent and standard of care and means and methods. And I think one of the things that's unique in design build is that bridge becomes much clearer, right? You're having that opportunity to partnership and get to means and methods while you're designing and having that input. Do you guys see the value in your projects and being able to bridge that as compared to the, traditional design bid build and put the documents out and argue later?
Definitely say yes, just because of the simple fact that you're there early to hash it out and just get on the same page with creating that unified execution plan, establishing the LOD expectations by phase, and just being truly aligned at it's not just about putting out contract documents, right? Yeah. We're using this model to build from. We're handing it to the owner for asset management, whatever those use cases or the value propositions are going to be. But it's so much easier because you're establishing that source of trust as a team, not just a you versus me mentality.
I think one thing that we all lose in the frustration of the day with whatever issue we're trying to deal with around the table is we're all heading for the same goal. Yep. We all want to build a structure that supports a client in the best way possible. And so if you can pull yourself back out of that, remind yourself of that in those situations and work together. I think also Armin's got his tagline for RevUP 25. See and believe.
There you go.
I know, when we talked about it, one way that we approach it and talk about it is a risk management process instead of a risk avoidance or, pushing it somewhere else. And Robin, you said it a little bit more directly in one of our meetings, which I think was great.
Well, I can help you fix it from the beginning, or I can fix it myself later.
I mean, that's the
Amen.
Essence of planning it, right? Plan the work and work the plan. But to the end, as Brad just said, we're all working holistically for the owners, right? Whether we're the architect, the engineer, the builder, the fabricator, the trade partner, we're all working towards that goal that owner set and established. They had an expectation. They had a performance criteria that they went out and looked for, and they brought the best team on board to deliver that. So as we've all worked collaboratively through the design and construction process and creating this model and having this opportunity where in Revizto, we have an integrated collaborative platform solution that tells the story of that design build process, giving it over to the owner is the next thing. And I think we've seen a lot of owners evolve their understanding of that, but how can all of you and the audience help educate them on what the opportunities are in the future to take that information and use it moving forward?
So I think one good point you just made is about the level of development and making sure we have that all agreed. When I was working in the Middle East, we had a 1,700-acre site in Dubai that we were working on, and I remember getting my first concept package from an American architect, and I was wondering where the rest of the documentation was, because it's very, very different in terms of delivery to what you get in Australia or through the plan of work. And so when I first came to the US, that was definitely one of the things that I sat down with the ownership group at that point in time, is to define, well, what is the objective that you want here? And what is the stage of deliverable that you want as we go through that design development process? And so actually having that outset and having the expectations for the whole design team, including the contractors and the trades, it really helps things run a lot smoother, because basically in the US you've got 50 different standards. You've got so many different approaches to how you do things, and without that standardization we can't get all on the same page. And so that leads to both price risk, and it leads to time risk and errors in coordination. So I think some of the things is really understanding from a holistic level is what it is that we're trying to achieve. I think you made a great point there. It's a case that we are all working to the same thing, and the same thing is to have a fantastic project that we've all enjoyed working on and can look back at it with pride and say, hey, we had a part of that project. So I think the other thing is, when you get to design and build, is really understanding that timing. I'm very familiar with the innovation process, and it's something that we used quite a lot, where we'd get, say, a concept architect, then from the concept architect, we'd have a local architect in various jurisdictions across the world. And then we'd bring in, as novated specialists from MEP and other groups as well. And so when I first worked on the project in the US, it was about a $300 million complex project that had sort and die prep, it had offices, it had data centers, all in the same vertical structure. And really just getting the design team around to establish what it was that they wanted from the performance of that project was the biggest thing that I did there. It took me 2 weeks to get everybody on the same page, because beforehand all we had was basically 1,100 pages of specifications of everything that they'd ever done before in the past, and said, okay, now go and build that, which is not really the best approach to design build. So I think it's really about simplifying the process, really helping get all the expectations of level of development out there, and really working with the entire team and over communicating. And again, current tools such as Revizto really helps understand why decisions were made at different stages along the way. And so I think that's definitely something we can do. The contracting issue is an issue here in the US. I don't think we have as clear a structure as you might have in other jurisdictions.
You know, when I think of strategies in better engaging, I think of challenging the notion of our stakeholders in the project lifecycle. And we is not just the owner, designer, contractor, and trade partners. We is inclusive of different stakeholder groups. And that could be user groups, but it could be suppliers, vendors. There's lots of people that can be in that we. So I would just challenge us as an industry in design build, focus on the we and have an engagement plan. How are you going to engage the project stakeholders in the project lifecycle in a very intentional way, so that it's not just saying, oh, we did a fly-through meeting with facilities and they like all the layouts for the MEP equipment, sounds good. It's thinking about the end users, right? Are we getting in those user group meetings to make sure they really feel heard? So when they walk into that facility, in reality, they're not disappointed, right? It's engaging them throughout the design and construction process so that the engagement is meaningful and that they really feel like they walked through that building virtually long before they ever got to set foot in it physically.
Do we make sure all the nurses can reach all of the med gas outlets? Can they turn off all the valves in the zone valve box? Because I'm going to get in trouble if they don't. And we can mock it up and we can prefab that stuff and get it out sitting in the shop months before we even break ground on the project.
Exactly. And can the doctor actually save lives in the position that the bed is set up in?
Is he going to get knocked out by the boom?
I think remembering that our clients are not just paying us to deliver a facility at the end. They're paying us to be taken on a journey. And if we can take them on a journey in a three-dimensional world, then it's understood all much better.
So we do not have time for Q&A. We wanted to make sure that we got through all those topics, but please give a round of applause to our panelists.